All right, it's Tuesday, and according to the little calendar on all of our devices and things like that, that means that yesterday was Monday. And according to the media planner that gets sent out every week telling us all the different interviews and availabilities we're going to have throughout the week, that means yesterday was Pat Narduzzi's weekly press conference. And we've been doing this for the first few weeks of the season, taking the Tuesday episode of the Morning Pitt and kind of cutting up a few clips from Pat Narduzzi, the things that I think are most interesting or most notable, and talking about them right here. And I don't know if you guys have enjoyed it or not, but I've kind of liked how it's come together. I feel like having Narduzzi's words, and you can hear from him directly, and then kind of responding and reacting to a few of those things, I think makes for some interesting conversation and discussion. And so we're going to do that again. I think we'll do it all season unless I run out of time on a Monday and don't have time to chop the film, as they say. I like it. I think it's interesting. And I think Pat Narduzzi definitely had some interesting things to say yesterday about Eli Holstein, about the run game, about penalties, about a few other items too. I got about 6 different clips here, so I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to jump into it, and we're going to hear from Pat Narduzzi some things that stood out to me from Pat Narduzzi's press conference here on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, so no surprises, I think, yesterday in Pat Narduzzi's press conference that there were, of what topics were covered, what questions were asked, what things we asked Pat Narduzzi about. We asked about the offense. We asked about Eli Holstein. We asked about the run game. We asked about penalties. And then, obviously, the challenges of facing Louisville, which we'll talk about more later in the week. I got to be honest, not one of these 6 clips that I have here has anything to do with Louisville. So maybe we're spending too much time looking back. Maybe we're spending too much time talking about Pitt, but that's what we're here to do. We'll talk about Louisville later in the week, as we preview this matchup and get ready for that game on Saturday at noon at Acrisure Stadium. But for now, we're starting off with the quarterback. We're starting off with the offense and the quarterback specifically. Eli Holstein, his game against West Virginia, which we talked about all week last week, talked about it again yesterday on the Morning Pitt. We have been talking about it nonstop. I'm sure the coaches have as well. What did Pat Narduzzi say about Eli Holstein's performance against West Virginia at his weekly press conference yesterday?
First thing we can do is make sure we protect the quarterback, right? I don't think we know, any contact on a quarterback affects a quarterback. So it doesn't help when you go out there in the first play of the game and you have a max protection called and we don't protect the quarterback. So that's where it starts. So. Again, the quarterback's always going to get all the praise when you're 2-0 and when he doesn't throw good enough. But pressure affects people. Okay, and we got to do a better job making sure it doesn't affect him and move on from it like we have. But we got to protect the quarterback. And we didn't do a good enough job protecting the quarterback on just fundamentals. And execution, and then there's a couple times where he's got to get rid of the ball where he runs into sacks as opposed to moving his feet in the pocket and letting the ball rip.
That said, there were a number of passes that he did have, Dez up the sideline or Justin Holmes up the sideline that were throws that were there to be made. As you watched it, as Cade watched it, where do you see some of those issues? Is it accuracy? Is he not comfortable?
Yeah, I think, again, he's got Dez. That's on a scramble, and it's a tough throw when you're running to the right and trying to lay it up there to Dez. And then, the one that Justin we thought was going to be there all week, he's just got to make the throws. You watch football on Saturday, they don't always make all those throws, and we'd like him to be perfect. He's not going to be, but, big-time players make those plays in big-time games, and we got to make those plays. That goes down to execution. We got to make the play when we have somebody open.
All right, there's a lot in there, and I know the really juicy bit is at the end, and we'll come back to that in a second. But the first thing Narduzzi says is, quote, the first thing we do is make sure we protect the quarterback, end quote. And, it's all about pressure. Look, if we've talked about the quarterback more than anything else over the last week, we've talked about the offensive line the second most over the last week and what that group needs to do. They're giving up too much pressure. They're not giving Eli Holstein enough time. Maybe the sack numbers jumped in the West Virginia game when Eli Holstein got sacked 6 times. The sack numbers weren't that bad for the first 2 games, but that was probably, I think, more to do with Eli Holstein escaping pressure than it had to do with him, with the offensive line blocking particularly well. But you know what? I looked on Pro Football Focus at ACC quarterbacks who've dropped back at least 100 times this year and how, what kind of pressure they've been under and what kind of pressure they've faced. And there's 13 ACC quarterbacks who have dropped back at least 100 times this season. So pretty representative sample of the conference. And among those guys, among those 13 quarterbacks with at least 100 dropbacks, Eli Holstein's pressure percentage, the percentage of his dropbacks where he's been under pressure, 31.1%, is actually the seventh lowest or seventh highest, however you want to look at it. It's seventh. All right, like Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech has been pressured on 40.9% of his dropbacks. It goes down from there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, till you get to Eli Holstein. So he's not getting pressured more than anybody else in the ACC. This isn't the worst offensive line group in the conference. His pressure rate is below Kyron Drones, Cade Klubnik, Ben Gulbranson from Stanford, Darian Mensah at Duke has been pressured more than Eli Holstein, or a higher percentage. CJ Bailey at NC State's been pressured a higher percentage. Steve Angeli, who got injured and is out for the season at Syracuse, all pressured at a higher percentage. And the reality is, like, I don't know if that's as big of a factor. Like, his pressure percentage is more or less in line with what most of the other top quarterbacks in the conference are seeing. And when you look at his stats, I mean, he's thrown 3 interceptions. Drones has thrown 3. Klubnik's thrown 4. Gulbranson's thrown 3. Mensah's thrown 2. Bailey's thrown 4. And even when you get into, like, completion percentage under pressure, Holstein is completing 47.4% of his passes on those pressure situations. That's more or less in line with the rest of the guys. It's actually even a little bit better. Like, Kyron Drones is only around 43%. Same for Cade Klubnik. Gulbranson is pretty rough, 35.5%. Darian Mensah is around 46%. CJ Bailey's around 50%. Only Syracuse kid was like above 60% in completion percentage under pressure. Holstein, 47.4%. It's not all that crazy. He's thrown, I think, 2 of his 3 interceptions. He was under pressure, maybe 1 of the 3. I forget. Wait, I have the number right here. 1 of the 3 were in pressure situations, but that doesn't really stand out that much. Other than CJ Bailey, he's got 4 picks this year, and they were all thrown in pressure situations. Everybody, my point is, Eli Holstein's not getting pressured that much more than, not that much more than the rest of the ACC's quarterbacks. He's not performing all that much worse under pressure than the rest of the ACC's quarterbacks. His completion percentage is right in line. His interceptions, if anything, he's got less. Gulbranson, at Stanford also has 1. Bailey, like I said, has 4. Cade Klubnik has thrown 2 interceptions under pressure. Kyron Drones has thrown 2 interceptions under pressure. I guess my point is, I don't know if I buy pressure as the problem. I don't know if I buy pressure as a legitimate excuse. Could the pass blocking be better? Absolutely. Has the offensive line been good enough? No. On pass protection or run blocking. But I don't know if I can go too far down that road. These are still throws that Eli Holstein has to make, which brings us to sort of the real money portion of that quote from Pat Narduzzi, because I followed, that was me asking the question in there of like, okay, that's fine pressure, but like there are throws that are there to be made. And I mentioned the Desmond Reed throw and the Justin Holmes throw, and there's a few others which we've recounted, over and over again over the last week. I said, those are what's happening there? And I think, and you heard it in Pat Narduzzi's answer, yeah, there's pressure, there's something to be accounted for there, but if you're going to be a big time college football quarterback, an ACC quarterback, you got to make those plays.
We'd like him to be perfect. He's not going to be, but big time players make those plays in big time big time games, and we got to make those plays. That goes down to execution. We got to make the play when we have somebody open.
Like he said, big time players make those plays in big time games, and we've got to make those plays. End quote. And I think that's something we've kind of hit on and talked about and touched on a number of times over the last week. That like some of these throws, no, they're not easy. Like, yeah, okay, that throw up the sideline, that takes really good touch to get it to Desmond Reed. But, like, you're supposed to be playing at the highest level of college football right now, right? Like, if you want to win games against Power 4 conference opponents, those are the throws you have to make. That was a tough throw. That's just not an excuse that flies. I don't think, because there's an expectation that you make those. It's like a wide receiver. Like, wow, that was a really tough catch. Yeah, if you want to be the best receiver, if you want to be one of the best receivers in the country, or one of the best receivers in the ACC, or one of the best receivers in the NFL, or whatever, well, you need to make that really tough catch. Like, that's why you get paid the big bucks. And we're not speaking figuratively anymore, right? We're talking about, in this age of NIL and revenue sharing, you are getting paid the big bucks. And you're getting paid the big bucks to drop that ball in the breadbasket for Desmond Reed so he can catch it and run 70 yards for a touchdown, to drop that ball in for Justin Holmes to catch and run for a touchdown. That's why you're getting the big bucks. Big-time players make those big-time plays, and Eli Holstein needs to do it, and he does. He makes big-time plays. If we said this once, we said it a million times, and so I don't want to go down the whole path again. I don't want to, because I have drawn comparisons between right now and where Pitt was 2 years ago when they had an off week. They changed the quarterback. They went from Phil Dracovic to Christian Bear ahead of a home game against Louisville. This is not like Phil Dracovic. Like Eli Holstein, there's upside. There's potential. There's a history, a very recent history of making big throws. And even this season, he has made some big throws. But he's not executing enough. And that's got to get figured out. We'll see what they come up with. All right, in terms of the run game, I think there's big questions there. And I've got a lot of stats written down. See the old legal pads out here, and I'm gonna drop a few of those on you in a second. But I asked Pat Narduzzi about your run game. Like, what can you do to get more consistent? You're not getting consistent enough production, that 4-yard carry, 5-yard carry, 6-yard gain, on a consistent basis. On this season, Pitt's running backs have run the ball 58 times. Only 28 of those carries have gained 4 or more yards. So less than half have gained 4 or more yards. They only have 6 explosive runs. If you count an explosive run as 10 yards or more, they only have 6 of those all season. Like I was talking to, I forget who I was talking to yesterday, and they pointed out that, Pitt only had 2 explosive runs against West Virginia. And yeah, that's not enough. I mean, with the way Pitt's offense is designed, like, that's not enough to get it done against a Power 4 opponent on the road. But they only had 4 in the first 2 games when they played Duquesne and Central Michigan. So they're not getting those big runs, and they're not getting that consistent down-to-down, those consistent down-to-down gains. And so that's what I asked Pat Narduzzi, what's missing there? Why are you not getting those 4, 5, 6-yard pickups on a more consistent basis?
Yeah, they ran the ball. We didn't run the ball, and again, it was all come down to execution across the board. But we had some good runs in there, I think, Chris. But they changed some things. I mean, at halftime, I think we went and adjusted some things as well on the sideline, just with some of the things they did differently than they had done in the previous game. So that'll all come, and it hurts. Again, we start off. Dez is breaking off some good runs, some 8, 9, 10-yard gains. So we just got to keep it rolling, and we should be fine. And we had when the young guys came in, some of the places we were running the ball wasn't exactly like it to be. But again, whether it was Boosie or Goff, those are things that will get cleaned up with the more experience they have.
So he's right there, kind of what he said near the end about Desmond Reed. He said, quote, Dez is breaking off some good runs, some 8, 9, 10-yard gains. Just got to keep it rolling, and we should be fine. End quote. And yeah, Desmond Reed's first carry in the game at West Virginia was an 8-yard gain, and then he went 3, 3, 2. And he had a 10-yard gain and a 4-yard gain. So out of Desmond Reed's 6 carries, he gained 4 yards or more on 3 out of those 6. Not bad. And there was an 8-yard gain in there. There was a 10-yard gain in there. The only other explosive carry was Juelz Goff had a 17-yard run later in the game. It's just not happening consistently enough. They're just not getting it. I always go back to that 4-yard gain because I feel like that's a win. And to some extent, I don't know how Cade Bell views it. Like, I don't mean about, whether 4-yard gain is a win. I think most coaches sort of accept that, if you can get first down, if you can get 4 yards or more and you're in, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, like, you love that spot. Like, that's a good pickup on first down. I just don't know if Cade Bell views the running game as a viable source of getting those gains. One of the best drives, I think Pitt's final touchdown drive, which I think I've talked about, Malachi Thomas gets a 4-yard pass on first down. Well, that accomplished the same thing as these running plays that I'm talking about. They get a 3-yard pass to Juelz Goff on second down on that drive, where Goff bobbled the ball, or else he probably could have picked up a few more, than 3 yards. But then on 3rd and 3, they go to Goff again with a pass, and he gets 10 yards. I think Cade Bell, that short passing game takes the place of the run game. Maybe not quite to the extent of Mark Whipple in 2019, but something close to it. It's not that far off, excuse me, of how Cade Bell uses the passing game. Of course, there's a bigger issue at hand here of Desmond Reed's availability. I asked Pat Narduzzi at the end of the press conference yesterday, it was Desmond Reed practicing last week? Is he practicing this week? And he said he was out there last week. That's a quote. Doesn't necessarily mean he was working. It just means he was out there. He was out at practice. Could have been standing on the sideline. Nobody knows. I don't know if Desmond Reed's going to be available for this game against Louisville. And we talked about this on the message board. You can check it out there for a little bit more of what we're hearing and what we expect. If Desmond Reed is out, that means Juelz Goff is the number one guy. And Ja'Kirian Turner, the true freshman, is behind him. So what does Narduzzi think about Juelz Goff? What's his expectations for him, and what level of trust does he have in the redshirt freshman running back, Juelz Goff?
I got a lot of trust in him. I mean, he plays big. He plays big. He had a nice run, I think, in the fourth quarter, bouncing out, breaking a few tackles, and getting around the edge for a big important gain on that play. But we had some, obviously protection issues as well that we got to get cleaned up with him, and we'll get that straightened out this week. But the more plays he's getting, the more confidence he has, and I think he can be a really good back in this conference.
Interesting little comparison here. Just I'm not going to read too much into this because I think Desmond Reed is the superior runner. He's explosive. He's one of the most explosive players on the team, one of the most explosive players in the conference, maybe the country. Okay, and so I'm not going to read too much into this, but it is interesting to me that if we go with that 4+ gain, 4 yards or more is a win on a rushing attempt. Desmond Reed, 24 carries this season. 11 of them have gained 4 yards or more. All right. Juelz Goff, 21 carries this season, so 3 fewer than Desmond Reed. 11 of his carries have gained 4 yards or more. Same number. And Goff has 2 short yardage touchdowns, a 2-yard run and a 1-yard run. So, if we set those aside, he's got 19 rushing attempts where there was more than 2 yards between him and the goal line, and he gained 4 yards plus on 11 out of those 19, whereas Desmond Reed has 11 4-yard carries out of 24 rushing attempts. Now, again, Desmond Reed is a special player. He's one of one. He's an All-American, all-purpose weapon for a reason. And Juelz Goff is not going to threaten defenses the way Desmond Reed does. At least from what he's shown thus far in his career, he's not going to create that threat. Maybe he can eventually get there, but in his own way. He's a different kind of runner than Desmond Reed. And so I'm not going to pretend like there's not a drop-off from Reed to Goff, because there is. But I also think Juelz Goff is a perfectly capable running back. And Ja'Kirian Turner, as a true freshman who learns something probably every time he steps on the field, and hopefully every time he's on the sideline too, is a very capable running back and explosive player as well. He's got 10 carries on the season, Turner does, and 4 of them have gained 4+ yards. Plus, he also had a short yardage touchdown, a 1-yard touchdown run. So I guess what I'm saying is the run blocking needs to be better, and if it is, I think Goff is perfectly capable of carrying the ball and having some success if they have to go forward without Desmond Reed for some amount of time. I forgot. I wanted to drop this quote in from Narduzzi in between the conversation about Eli Holstein and the conversation about the run game, but I forgot to do it. I forgot that this was my next one. So I want you to hear this clip. Pat Narduzzi talking about Cade Bell, Pitt's offensive coordinator. They watch film together and what he thinks of how Bell has done.
I think he caught a hell of a game, to be honest with you. I mean, we got to execute. We got to make plays. I mean, there's plays you'd like to have back here and there. And communication can always be better. But I thought, when you go back and watch the tape with him and see what's there and what's open, and if we get the block there, if we get this, I thought we put ourselves in some good positions that we got to finish.
I think he called a hell of a game, to be honest with you. We've got to execute and we've got to make plays. Like that, it's interesting. Like that might be the kind of quote that people look at and say, What are you talking about? They only scored 2 touchdowns. But it ties in with so many of the things we've talked about this week and over the last week. When we talked about the missed passes, when we talked about the penalties, how the penalties undid some really good situations. When Eli Holstein's misses on open receivers just completely took away opportunities to move the ball downfield and or score touchdowns. Like, was Cade Bell perfect in Morgantown? No. Were there things he could have done better? Were there situations where he could have called different plays or maybe taken a different approach? For sure. And I don't say that just in retrospect. I think even at the time it was, there were probably better options on the table. But he called a good enough game to win. Where again, it's always when you get into hypotheticals, when you get into this, you get into that well, if they had just done this or if they had just done that. Like I try when I get into hypotheticals to, how far do we have to stretch logic? How far do we have to stretch reason, right? Like we don't have to stretch reason that if Lyndon Cooper doesn't jump on the pile there, Malachi Thomas has Pitt at the 7, right? Like I don't have to stretch reason that if Eli Holstein hits Desmond Reed or Justin Holmes up the sidelines, like at least one, if not both of those plays are touchdowns. Like we don't have to stretch reason to get to some of those. Deuce Spann running the Wildcat to the 1 if Justin Holmes doesn't hold. Like we don't have to, get crazy with it. When we talk about, well, if this had happened or if that had happened. And I think when you look at those, you say, well, the Wildcat was a good call. The play to Holmes up the sideline was a good call. The play to Thomas was a good call. And they were all undone for different reasons, but they were good calls, good play calls that ultimately could have won the game and should have won the game. And so I don't think Cade Bell was perfect in Morgantown, but I don't entirely disagree with Pat Narduzzi that I guess I would go so far as to say he called a hell of a game. Sure. Last one, penalties. Pitt had 14 penalties at West Virginia. Let's hear from Pat Narduzzi about it, and then I'll give you some numbers to chew on before we get out of here.
You got to say it's a discipline issue, but it's not like when you think discipline, like disciplining your children, but it's just being smart. I mean, we got to be smart. You guys watched the videotape. You saw some of the penalties that were either there or not there. But we just got to be smart, and I think it's just being aggressive. I mean, we talk about aggressive penalties and unforced penalties and selfish penalties, but we've got to be smarter. We're better football players. We're smarter than that. And if they're going to call it that close, then we got to do a better job. As coaches, making sure that we give them no reason to call a roughing the passer or trying to go push a pile and all of a sudden the pile goes down and you go over top. I mean, we just got to be smarter.
He couldn't quite resist the, talking about how some of the penalties are bad. And that's always going to be the case. You're just going to have to, that's going to come with Pat Narduzzi when you ask him about penalties. But the reality is, 14 penalties in that game, it's nothing new. And I'm not saying that to excuse it. I'm saying that it's just a habitual problem with this team and this program. 131 games for Pitt football since 2015, right? That's the entirety of the Narduzzi era. 131 games since 2015. Pitt has been called for 10 or more penalties 22 times in those 131 games. That's like 17%. Basically once every 6 games or so. Pitt gets called for 10 plus penalties. And Pitt is 7-15 in those games. They've been called for 9 or more penalties 37 times. They've been called for 8 or more penalties 50 times over the course of 131 games. 7 or more penalties 60 times. 6 or more penalties 79 times. 5 or more penalties 100 times. 100 out of 131 games, Pitt has taken at least 5 penalties. More than, nearly half of the games under Pat Narduzzi, Pitt has been called for 7 or more penalties. They've only won 7 times when they've taken 10 or more penalties in a game. Most of them were in 2019, actually. Duke, Delaware, North Carolina, Ohio. They were called for 10-plus penalties in all those games. They got called for 10 penalties in the Penn State game in 2016. Actually, the West Virginia game last year, they were called for 12 penalties, and then the Wake Forest game in 2018 where they clinched the ACC championship, clinched the Coastal Division championship, they were called for 10 penalties. Those are the 7 games that they've won with 10 or more penalties. I'm going to write all this in an article too, so don't try to memorize these numbers. There won't be a quiz on it. I will put it in writing for you tomorrow, maybe later today or maybe tomorrow. We'll see how it works out. But it's what they do. And I mean, that's why I followed up with that question of nobody wants to commit penalties. Like, your guys aren't out there saying, I'm going to try and commit a penalty here. This is my drive. This is my drive to go out there and rough the passer. Coach, I got this. All right. I got you. I got you. I'm going to false start here. Maybe twice. Like, nobody's doing that. But there's clearly an issue. Like, there's clearly some reason that this continues to happen. And I can't hear I can't hear that it's bad calls, because every now and then there are bad calls. Now, there might be a bad call every game. But when you have 22 games over the course of 11 seasons, or, I mean, really 10 seasons plus 3 games, and you have 22 games with 10 or more penalties called against you, they're not out to get you, and they're not all bad calls. There's something wrong, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what it stems from. And, you know, I mean, really, we're talking about 22 games. Like, 12 of them were 2018 through 2020. 8 of them were in 2019 and 2020. And hey, I mean, like, Paris Ford and DeMar Hamlin probably got ejected at least 4 times in that span, if not more. So, I mean, you know, they add up. They add up. It depends on the team. The only 2 seasons when Pitt did not have a game with 10-plus penalties, 2017 and 2021. They've already got 1 this year. Still 9, 10 games left to play. Can always get more. All right. We went long, but hopefully you found it interesting. I like digging into some of these quotes. Let me know what you think about any of those topics here in the comments on YouTube or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, because it's always fun to see those numbers roll up. All right. Thanks for checking out the video today. Hope you had a good Monday and got your week off to a great start. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.